And so our next speaker wrote a book called Opium Nation, Drug Lords, Child Brides, and One Woman's Journey Through Afghanistan. She is an esteemed journalist who's written for the San Francisco Chronicle, BBC News, and NPR, and we hope she will illuminate the severity of this issue. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Fariba Nawa.
Sorry, I'm gonna come out of the podium because you can't see me then. Salam alaikum, خوش آمدین افغانای عزیز. شبتان خوش. Thank you to the speakers. I'm very happy to be here this evening, and they gave us so many different topics to talk about. I'm not exactly sure what to focus on, but the book itself, for those of you who've read it and know about it, it's been out for a couple of years. The title is the first thing that a lot of Afghans get turned off by. Why did you call us Opium Nation? We don't like it. We already get enough negative publicity. So I immediately want to come to this right now so that that question is not brought up again, because in every talk that I do, this is, and where there are Afghans, this becomes an issue. The reason that it was called Opium Nation is because that's what the publishers wanted to call it. I had chosen Where the Poppies Bloom. But there is a reality in Afghanistan, as John mentioned, and we're becoming the third largest addicted country in the world. First is Iran, second is Costa Rica, and third is Afghanistan. But also, that's not how I started my work. My work started because it provides 90% of the world's heroin. And it used to be opium, but now it's more and more heroin because 2/3 of the opium is turned into heroin inside Afghanistan. And it's done on different levels. It can either be done in mountain caves, and I've gone to those, where with helicopters, where they shoot up empty pots and pans, because most of the time the government informants are also involved with the drug dealers. Or they can be done in your home, if you know how to cook low-grade heroin. So there's a lot of illegal things going on in Afghanistan regarding the drug trade, but it's a very complicated industry. It was 40 to 60% of the drug trade, of the economy, but right now, they're saying that it's only 15%, according to the UN. I have to question that because I don't know exactly what happened, other than the only other alternative that has been able to make as much money as opium for farmers and drug dealers is saffron. And saffron Iran is trying to stop that because it's competition for them. But that's part of what's been happening with counter-narcotics, is they're trying to fix this problem by introducing alternative crops. As most of you know, Afghanistan did produce opium or poppy historically, but it was for Iran's consumption. Now it's for the world. And where there's demand, there's supply. We have a long history of it, but the last 30 years has been what is going on. In the last 30 years is where the problem has become the greatest. And in the last 12 years, since the US came, the addiction problem has gotten the worst. He mentioned addiction, and I just saw the document. There was a BBC documentary by Tahir Qadiri that goes and talks to someone and follows their life through it. And most of the people who are addicted right now are coming back from Iran and Pakistan. They were refugees, and they got addicted in the neighboring countries to Afghanistan's opium or heroin. And when they repatriate back to Afghanistan, they bring back their addiction with them. And more what's happening is women and children are becoming addicted as well. Because a lot of these women in the villages where I was in Badakhshan, they don't have access to health care, so they use it for medicinal purposes. It's their only way of killing their pain. And then often they do the same for their children. They blow the smoke into their children's mouth so that their children are no longer feeling the pain from any kind of illness. So you have a lot of people addicted, not just in the cities, but in the villages. It's heartbreaking to see Afghans in Kabul, on the side of the Kabul River, sitting there and shooting up. There are only 43 treatment centers right now. And they're similar to what you see here, but there's a place called Nijat Center, which I visited, and it's only for men. I think there may be only a couple for women right now. They have a 70% relapse rate. They spend maybe 3 months in these places, they go back, they come back. It's very hard to get off heroin. Opium is much easier to wean from, but heroin is the most addictive and the deadliest drug there is. As far as the subject that I wanted to focus on a little bit besides the book, how are we doing on time? Good, okay. Is psychological trauma. That was one of the discussion points of the diaspora and those abroad. One of the things that I specialize in, and the book is about, are women's roles in the drug trade. How are women involved? Women are involved in every aspect of it, from being sold into slavery and bartered into marriage as opium brides, to being poppy farmers. One of the smartest women I met in Afghanistan was a poppy farmer, and she was a woman, and I love telling her story. I call her Parween. I changed all the names in the books for obvious reasons, but she had an acre of land up on a hill, and she decided to plant poppy, and she had a very good harvest. She made quite a bit of money, and this is a woman who's never had 3 meals a day. They had a very, very simple life before that. The drug dealers come to the farmers directly and buy the opium from them. And so they don't have to go market it or sit in a shop and sell it. The drug dealers do that themselves. I was in Badakhshan in this place called Argo, and I had the opportunity to visit the Opium Bazaar. But Parveen was the one who told me to go to the Opium Bazaar. She knew all about it. What she did with her money is she didn't spend it on getting more poppy or buying more drugs. She actually bought her son and daughter who were living with her and who were married with kids. She was able to give them a livelihood. They didn't have jobs, so she bought her daughter a carpet frame and said, I taught you how to weave carpets. Why don't you weave carpets and get out of my house and go have your own life, and you can sell the carpets to the foreigners or to a foreign market. For her son, she bought him a car, and he turned it into a taxi. And she told him, now go live your own life. And for herself, she was able to eat 3 meals a day with her, 12 kids. So, and she told me she wanted to wean off of poppy. Just like you do it as an addict, you have to wean off of it as a farmer as well, because it is your only thing at this point. Unfortunately, she didn't have the right connections in the government, so they came and they eradicated her field. And one of my favorite chapters in the book is the day that they come, and she called it, they came and they raped my field. Yeah. And she stood there watching it, and she threatened to kill herself while they did that, because that's all she had. When I met her, it was after the fact. And we talked about how it had impacted her, and the psychological trauma of becoming an opium farmer. I asked her, don't you feel guilty as a Muslim? Don't you feel that it's haram? That what you're doing here is going to lead to the addiction, and you see many of the people in your own community addicted? And she just looked at me and she said, show me something else. Unfortunately, the international community has not been successful, but I don't like playing the blame game, because we Afghans we have 2 themes in our history that we need to remember. One is external meddling, which is very true. Some people believe Afghanistan has been created to fail as a state because it was created as a buffer zone by the British. But in that time, there's been, I believe, a national identity built, whatever ethnic group you are. And that national identity has been tampered with in the last 30 years like never before. Still though, wherever I went, from Kandahar to Badakhshan, and I traveled all over except the east, when I asked the Hazara, Tajik, and Pashtun, what are you? How would you identify yourself to a foreigner? They all said Afghan. And we are from the nation of Afghanistan. And I'm talking about from 500 to 1,000 interviews during the 7 years that I traveled in Afghanistan, from the year 2000 to 2007. That said something very positive to me. However, we all are aware that there's serious internal neglect and corruption inside Afghanistan, and that's our number #1 challenge right now. So when we sit and have discussions about what needs to be fixed and how we need to approach it, I think we need to look inward first and then outward. Because when you look at the press, and I'm a part of the press, this is the national narrative the US sees the rest of us as. You're a bunch of savages. We tried to go out there and help you. You're so corrupt. You hate your women. You beat them. You burn them. You cut off their noses. There's nothing we can do for you. It's all your fault. We couldn't save you. Therefore, we're going to leave you now. This is the national narrative that America has on Afghanistan. And it isn't fair, is it? Because they went there and they bombed our people and they're taking our resources. But that's how it's being presented as. If you read news articles, read the comments at the bottom about Afghanistan, and you'll see what I'm talking about. So what I'm doing as a journalist is trying to combat that in whichever way I can. The latest article that I read that upset me a lot, let's not even talk about the Boston bombings. I just had a piece in the Chronicle about that, but that's a different topic, and I'm glad that no Afghans were involved with that. But the latest article, and I'm going to finish with this, is the UN representative to Afghanistan was asked a question at a big press conference, and it was, the rate of domestic violence has gone up 20% from 2011 to 2012. There are 87% of Afghan homes inside Afghanistan, there's domestic violence. Why is that? Do you know what he said? He said it's our culture. To thousands of people reading this, and I was one of them. It's very upsetting because you and I know that our brothers and our fathers are not beating us every day. But this is the image that is being presented out there. And I think the most important thing we can do as Afghan Americans to combat that is to tell our own stories to whoever we meet outside of the community, so that they know. But we do have a problem. Just so you know, Fremont, if you talk to the Fremont Police Department, who has the biggest rate of domestic violence among minorities? It's Afghans, even here. And that has to do not with the culture, but with the psychological trauma that comes from war. It comes from an emasculated country who has 1 million war widows. I don't know how many million mine victims, and an economy that is based on an illegal drug that destroys people. So I don't mean to leave you off with this very depressing note, but it's a way to inspire you to mobilize, as Atta John said. And thank you for listening.